In this video lecture, we'll review the cognitive perspective on anxiety disorders. This comic about Anxiety Girl illustrates the emphasis of the cognitive approach to our anxiety disorders. So Anxiety Girl is able to jump to the worst conclusion in a single bound, thinking, oh no, these tights are too tight, I think I'm going to die. So remember, in general, from our cognitive perspective, we are thinking about the importance of individuals' beliefs in how they interpret specific scenarios and how those beliefs produce characteristic patterns of emotional and behavioral responses. And our cognitive specificity hypothesis suggests that our disorders can be differentiated from one another on the basis of characteristic patterns of cognitive biases and cognitive distortions. So when we think about the cognitive approach, we can identify several characteristic kinds of cognitive biases that are associated with our anxiety disorders. One major set of cognitive biases that characterize individuals with anxiety disorders is that they have systematic biases in cognition related to their perceptions of the likelihood of encountering dangerous or threatening situations and their interpretations of the severity of the level of threat or danger that are posed by those dangerous situations. For example, individuals with anxiety disorders tend to overestimate the probability that they will encounter something dangerous. So for example, someone with a snake phobia might overestimate the probability that they will encounter a snake in a given situation. They also tend to overestimate the level of danger that is associated with their phobic stimulus. So for example, an individual with a phobia of dogs who might be afraid of being bitten by a dog might believe that if they are bitten by a dog that they will probably die or potentially be severely disfigured. So they overestimate the actual level of danger that would be present if they encountered the situation that makes them anxious. And they also tend to underestimate their ability to cope if they were faced with their phobic object or the situation that provokes anxiety. So when they think about how they would respond in a situation where they had to face their phobic situation or the circumstances in which they experience anxiety, they tend not to come up with ideas for behaviors that they would engage in order to be able to respond to that threat or danger. And they don't believe that their coping responses would be effective to help manage that potential danger. So these systematic patterns of biases in cognition lead individuals to overestimate the likelihood that they will encounter something dangerous, overestimate how dangerous or threatening that situation would actually be, and underestimate how well they would be able to respond if they did encounter the thing that they are afraid of. In addition to these systematic biases related to the phobic object, we also see some specific maladaptive beliefs about anxiety itself. So one common cognitive bias that we will see are beliefs that anxiety and the symptoms of anxiety in and of themselves are dangerous. We particularly see this in disorders like panic disorder. So individuals with panic disorder who experience panic attacks will believe that the symptoms of the panic attack are dangerous in and of themselves. So they don't necessarily believe that they are having a panic attack because there is something dangerous or threatening in their external environment, but they believe that the symptoms of the panic attack, for example, having a pounding heart, could be physically dangerous. So they might believe that their heart is pounding so quickly that their heart is going to stop, or that they're going to have a heart attack, or that they will pass out and fall down and hurt themselves. So they overestimate the level of danger associated with the actual symptoms of anxiety. Another common belief that we see in anxiety disorders are beliefs that avoidance behaviors and worry are effective coping strategies. So for example, in generalized anxiety disorder, it's very common for individuals to say, well, if I don't worry about this, the bad thing will actually happen. Sometimes this can even get to a level that it kind of approaches magical thinking. So individuals who are worried about bad things happening to people they care about will say, well, if I worry that my children are going to be harmed or that my partner is going to lose his job, if I worry about it, it won't happen. But if I don't worry about it, something bad will happen. Other individuals might think things like, well, if I don't worry about studying for this exam, I won't study and then I will fail the exam. However, we know that in general, worry actually decreases individuals' ability to effectively problem solve. So the more an individual is engaging in worry about potential future danger, the less they are actually engaged in behaviors in the moment that might help reduce those negative outcomes that they are afraid of. So for example, in the studying scenario, when people spend a lot of time worrying about their exam performance, they're actually less likely to use effective studying strategies that will help them do well on the exam, and they're more likely to do poorly on the exam itself. So in combination with those biases in perceptions of threat or danger, these maladaptive beliefs about anxiety itself are also associated with the increased risk for developing anxiety disorders and can maintain these anxiety disorders over time. One way that we can distinguish our anxiety disorders from one another is by looking at some of the characteristic cognitions that are associated with particular disorders. So for example, when we look at phobias, we often see specific cognitions related to perceptions of the probability of encountering a threat or how dangerous the phobic object is. So an example of a characteristic phobia we might see with a fear of dogs is if I encounter a dog, the dog is going to bite me. In social anxiety disorder, we see characteristic cognitions related to the likelihood of negative evaluation, particularly the likelihood that an individual's symptoms of anxiety will be perceived by other people and that they'll be judged negatively for having those symptoms. So for example, someone with social anxiety disorder, if they were giving a public talk, might think, everybody can see how anxious I am. In panic disorder, we often see those characteristic thoughts about the danger associated with physical symptoms of anxiety. So for example, if I can feel my heart pounding, it means that I'm having a heart attack. In agoraphobia, we often see thoughts related to the ability to cope with symptoms of anxiety. So for example, if I have a panic attack while I'm driving, I'll crash the car and kill someone. These beliefs can perpetuate those avoidance behaviors that are characteristic of agoraphobia, where individuals make significant changes to their behavior in order to reduce the likelihood of having a panic attack. And then finally, with generalized anxiety disorder, we often see those metacognitions, those beliefs about anxiety. So for example, if I don't worry about something bad happening, I won't be prepared if that bad thing happens. So those beliefs about the function of worry can help maintain the uncontrollable worry that characterizes generalized anxiety disorder.